Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Travel Channel on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palomino, will be your host for today. And today we have a very exciting city we're going to look at. It's called Prague, otherwise known as the city of 100 spires. And this city has been around, obviously, for a long time. But what you find out about Prague, which is very interesting, is that they, how do you say, is the fifth largest, most visited city in Europe. And that part I had a hard time believing. So who's ahead of them? London, of course. More people go to London than Paris, of course. That's number two, or one and two. They're both up there. Then Rome, of course. People would end up going to Rome before they would go to, Prague. So then all of a sudden you see up there Prague. And you're going like, are you kidding me? Why is Prague such a visited city? And so the thing is, part of it is what we're going to see today. It's a very inexpensive city to go to. In other words, it's a budget city. So if you're thinking about, well, I want to go to a nice place, very European, don't want to spend a lot of money, then you want to go to Prague. So what are we going to look at? And what does Prague have? Number one, they have the old town and the clock tower. And it's really busy, and yes, it's full of turistas. Part of it, it's an astronomical clock. It's the oldest continuous astronomical clock in existence since the 1400s. And yeah, we're going to take a look at it. There's crowds all over the place. It's like the Mona Lisa of Prague. So we'll take a look at that. The other thing that's interesting is the Charles Bridge. Okay, believe it or not, people go see a bridge, but you're going to see what we're going to see today. There's a lot of things that the people will look at, and Prague is almost built around being a Disneyland of Europe. In other words, if you want European Disneyland, we'll see what I'm talking about later on. They're very clever how they do this in Prague. But anyway, there was a bridge. It was the Judith Bridge originally. Then, of course, flood came or got torn down. And then they built the Charles Bridge in 1357. And they're very proud of Charles IV because he was the, quote, Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Emperor is big. It's like Charlemagne in 800. And then Charles IV. And then Charles V was the Holy Roman Emperor. And he was a fantastic guy. I wish there was more written about him. They talk a lot about Henry VIII. We're remaking the Odyssey, but what about Charles V? Great stories there. So people go see the Charles Bridge. And then there's the Prague Castle. You cannot miss the castle because it dominates the skyline when you go out to see it. I mean, it's huge. And they have something very interesting in this castle. Not only it's one of the largest castles in the world, they also have St. Vitus Cathedral, which was built in 1344, which basically sits on top of the castle, and you can't miss that. So it gives you this medieval look to it. Now, it's called the city of 100 spires, but now they say there's only 50 of them because a lot of them burned down, typical European, or they were destroyed in, they were destroyed, wars, etc., tend to have problems in Europe. Now, what we did is we stayed in the Michelangelo Hotel. Now, remember, I recommended the Intercontinental, but I didn't find the Intercontinental back then, but the Intercontinental is going to be my next day. But the Michelangelo Hotel was really great. So if you want a more budget-friendly but great hotel, go to the Michelangelo. And what happens when you're in the Michelangelo? You go outside and you see Frank Kafka's head. Now, he's a very famous author. They love him in Czechoslovakia. He wrote Metamorphosis, and but what they have is his head. Seriously, it's a big head, huge. And it moves around and it rotates. And there's tons of touristas looking at it. It's like an electronic head. But this is what you're going to find about Prague. Prague is very smart when it comes to feeding touristas. And we'll look at some things today on that. So right now we're going to take a little break we'll go back to all the stuff that they do. We're going to look at some of the things that that we just talked about. And first of all, we're going to look at the Charles Bridge. Okay, so I'm going to move aside here, and this is going to be the famous Charles Bridge. All right. Now you can imagine you're going to fly halfway across the world to look at this bridge. Well, it's historic, but we walked across it. It has statues in it. It's pretty cool, But this is one of their main attractions, to go look at a bridge that was built in 1357 and finished around the 1400s, maybe 1402 or something like that. And here's another view of the Charles Bridge. So again, it's pretty interesting. Now, what is that up there? Again, we're looking at probably St. Vitus Cathedral. Like I said, the Prague Castle dominates the skyline when you're walking around Prague. And you notice you get this big medieval feel with all those spires sitting up out there. The Church of St. Nicholas. I mean, all these places are unbelievable. And so like you're getting European feel, but also on a budget price. And I think that's the reason people go to Prague. It is one of the least expensive cities we visited in Europe. It's not the cost of Amsterdam, which is expensive, Paris, expensive, London, expensive, Prague, not so expensive. So if you want a budget vacation, this is definitely the place to go. And if you want to see a European city, it's pretty cool. But they're designed, this whole city is designed to attract touristas. Now, across the street from the Michelangelo, there's a what do I call it? Like a plaza, mall, a shopping mall, which is pretty cool. So you go from the Michelangelo, you see the Kafta head, and then you see this. What is this? It's a hanging cow, and this is what they do in Prague: a hanging cow. And I'm not kidding. Right in the middle of a shopping center. Yeah, this is typical Prague, but we'll see later on what I'm talking about. All these little things out there to attack tourists. That's the reason I'm saying it's not really a Disney World. It's really old Florida before Disney. They have all these museums and attractions, and we're going to look at them today, things that you just don't believe. So it's more like Florida in the 1950s and the early 60s with all these interesting attractions to keep people occupied. Remember I talked about Kafta head? Well, there it is. It's a Kafta head. I mean, seriously. And then this thing rotates around, and notice all the touristas around watching it because it'll move around. It's kind of cool. I guess it gives you something to see. And here's another version of the Kafta head, and people just looking around, seeing it. So Prague has some very interesting things. Now, the other thing is, unlike the city of music, which is Vienna, Prague steals from everybody, or actually borrows or has some things. One is we went to a Mozart play, and they had one. It was, you had to go to a separate hotel. It was actually pretty good. They have a dinner, they have a play, they have music. It's pretty cool. And so again, it's another thing that they attract touristas, and they have beautiful settings like this. And this is the advantage of if you go to Prague, it's very inexpensive. You get a lot for what you're paying for. And then also they have to have the dancing tower. Remember, everything's designed to attract you. And see the tower in the middle there? It's moved to the side. It's called a dancing tower. It was built in like 1996, again, to attract touristas. Now, we saw this, and we took this picture on a cruise on the Vlada River. And the Vlada River cruise is good. Is it as good as the Danube in Budapest? No. But is it a decent cruise? Yes, because you actually go down a real river. Is it better than the cruise in Vienna where you go down the Danube, but not really, you go down the Danube Canal? Yeah, it's a better cruise than that. So it's not as good as Budapest, but it's not bad. And you get to see this thing called the dancing tower. Buildings in Prague, they have a lot of buildings and architecture. And this is part of the reason you go, because it's things that you don't see in the United States, is the beautiful architecture, and of course, tons of tourists. We realize it is the 5th largest visited city in Europe. So you're just going to have to deal with all the tourists that are there. That's the thing that shocked me. I was going, wow, there's a lot of people. And why? It is a very inexpensive city to go to. Like I said, you go to Amsterdam, expensive, Paris, London, expensive, Rome, expensive, and then Prague, not so expensive. So that's part of the reason people go. And the other reason is the architecture. Take a look at this. Wow. This is like on every corner of Prague. It's just old buildings with beautiful architecture, beautiful paintings, and notice tons of touristas. So don't get shocked in the old town. You're going to see a lot of this. Okay, and now we go back to the Prague Cathedral. This is the Prague Cathedral, St. Vitus. It is quite impressive. It's old, and that's one reason, but it's very Gothic in nature. And of course, is it crowded? Yes, it's crowded. Lots of people up there to see the cathedral, and they have some also just really some stunning gold work there. I do suggest you take a tour. We took a tour on Prague, and it took like 2 hours, and it was not really something I'd want to do again, because it was either 2 or 3 hours, but it was way too long. But Prague also has some very, very interesting churches with some very nice Gothic artwork that you're going to see. And then, of course, there's the Prague Grand Hotel Europa. And this is where almost all these places, they have evening events that you can go to, dinners and music. Remember, this is designed to attract touristas and keep touristas there, and we're going to see that later on in this particular program. And of course, like I said, the churches are just very grand if you happen to go in there. And so then now that you're admiring all this great artwork and churches and buildings, then you come across something that you just wouldn't believe after seeing all this stuff. It's called Popeyes America. I'm just calling it. You cannot be serious. Famous Louisiana chicken right in the middle of Old Town Prague. But remember, this is, this is just the way it is today. In other words, you come across all of a sudden there's Popeyes, but some Americans, they got to go to their Popeyes. So Popeyes is there and available for you to go to. And then, of course, they have some very old churches. This one is extremely old. So we do have that. And then, of course, a beautiful skyline. So we're going to adjourn on the skyline. We're going to go back to take a look at some of the things that we think you might find interesting or not so interesting when it comes to Prague. So I'm going to go take a look at this right now. We're going to show you some of the things that maybe you don't want to go to in Prague. Like I said, it's designed to attract you. Remember, we did see the Kafta's Head, the St. Vitus Cathedral that was built around 1344, and the Prague Castle, which is even older than that. And then the Dancing House, which was designed in 1966 by Frank Gehry and Vlado Mulinik. But now comes the museums. Okay, remember, they're designed for touristas. So you have the National Museum. Now, I didn't go to the National Museum, but I did look at it. It's probably worth going to. On another trip, I can see that I have not fallen into all the tourist traps of Prague. I got to do that. There's the Frank Kafka Museum. Well, I saw his head. Isn't that good enough? No, they have to have a museum as well. But there's more. How about the Museum of Communism? Only in Prague could you find a Museum of Communism. Did I get to go? No, but maybe I should go. Got to be pretty interesting. The Mucha Museum. I actually did go see this. And these museums aren't big. They're small, interesting, and he was an artist, did poster art, and I actually got some of his art. It's really good, so it was worth going to. It's one of the small ones I went to. Then we have the Sex Machine Museum. You cannot be serious. Yes, they do. This is in Prague, so if you're interested in sex machines, you can go see the Sex Machine Museum. But let's say you're not. You can go see the Illusion Art Museum. Yes, only in Prague, the Illusion Art Museum. But if that doesn't attract you, how about the Museum of Senses? Seriously? They have a Museum of Senses? Yes, they do in Prague. Then if you like traditional artwork, you go to the Lobkowicz Palace. And then they have the traditional art. Now that one I might go visit next time I'm there. And then they have the Speculum Archime Museum, only in Prague. So like I said, you've got lots of entertainment there. And how about the National Technical Museum? See, so you can get that, but you're kidding me. Nope, National Technical Museum in Prague. But if you're not interested in that, how about steel art? Not just art, but steel art museum. Yes, they have that in Prague also as well. Then they have a national memorial to the heroes of Heydrich Terror. He was apparently a really bad guy, and they finally ended up killing him, but he was a bad Nazi, basically. Then they have a Národní Gallery Praha. So they have another gallery. Don't know what it's about, but you can go there. But if you don't know what all these things, go to the Story of Prague Museum. Then maybe you'll be able to learn more about Prague. Like I said, we took a 3-hour tour, and unfortunately, it was kind of boring, and I was tired, up and down hills. Ugh. You know, I usually tours for me an hour, 2 hours max. 3 hours, you're going too much. Okay, then you have the Army Museum of Zitskov. Didn't go to that one either, but just to give you an idea what they have, a lot of little attractions there. How about the Signal Space Digital Art Gallery? Okay, maybe it'll attract some people. Or the Strakowski Cluster Museum. Yeah, in Prague. But you'd think that this wouldn't be in Prague, but how about this one? The National Film Museum, of course, you know, not in Hollywood, in Prague. And then you also have the Jewish Museum. Notice more entertainment than you can possibly want. Then we're not done with communism. We have the Cold War Museum. So the thing is, if you like Cold War, they have that too. Remember we talked about the Museum of Illusions? How about another one? The Museum of Fantastic Illusions. Okay. And the one I went to, like I said, is the Mucha Museum. I thought that was pretty good. But we're not done with Cold War yet, because remember, this was a communist country at one time. So we also have the KGB Museum. All right. And then the National Gallery of St. Agnes. Now that one is on my list. So I do plan on going to that once I go back. I gotta go see the National Gallery. It has a lot of old artwork. It doesn't seem like it's huge, but it's also looks pretty neat. Then Mozart Museum. What about Vienna? Well, he also visited Prague. So you get your Mozart Museum there, and you get a taste of Mozart there. And then there's more, but there's more. Museum of Bricks. Now, think about this. Are you serious? Bricks? And you're going to have a museum of... Prague is unbelievably innovative and creative on figuring ways to keep you occupied. And one thing they have, not only museums, they have quite a bit of what they call it, music in cathedrals throughout the city in the evenings. So you'll always be entertained. And there's more museums. The Kingdom of Railway Museum. So I just want to give you a little flavor of these museums that they have in Prague, in case you do have to go, and you want to go, you want to see some things. They got quite a bit. But after you're done with the Popeyes, can't get enough of Popeyes, and you want to go see something, let's get rid of this. We don't want to see the Kingdom of Railways Museum unless you're really that interested. We're going to get rid of that right now. We're going to go take a look at some of the other things that they have besides Popeyes, because I'm sure you didn't go all the way to Prague just to see a Popeyes. You want to see the Prague skyline, and this is like everywhere. I mean, these unbelievable, fantastic buildings with the, notice the statues that are embedded in the building and the architecture that they put this together back, you know, hundreds of years ago. And this is the fantastic reason you go to Prague, is the skyline. But there's more, because remember, this 100 skyscrapers. Now they say there's only 50 skyscrapers, but there's enough to keep you interested. And there's more. And you take a look at this, you're going like, wow, unbelievable. I mean, very, very Gothic, very old, and certainly worth looking at. In other words, you get your European fix by looking at that. And then the statutes are everywhere. So you do get a chance to look at some of these statutes that were built hundreds, literally hundreds of years ago. But the streets are different than they are in Hungary. One thing you'll find out about the streets in Prague is that they're very clean. Now, if you notice that there's no graffiti on the walls, unlike Barcelona, where I live, or Madrid, and other places in Europe, there's graffiti. I couldn't find one graffiti anywhere in Prague. The first thing that strikes you, and then all the streets are clean. In other words, where's the dirt? Where's the garbage? Apparently they run around, they clean this city like 24/7. So this is one of the most pristine cities. It's comparable to Vienna that I've ever been in. It's unbelievably clean. This is not a U.S. city where there's graffiti everywhere, junk everywhere. It's clean, no graffiti, unbelievable. Lots of tourists, and this is one of the typical roads. And then they have very good trams, and you could ride these trams for like next to nothing all over Prague. So if you look at it, it's really designed for a budget traveler who wants entertainment. But like I said, the streets are a little different than they are in Vienna. They're more cobblestone, and they give you that feel. So when you look at the Prague streets, you're looking at nice architecture, good streets, good places to shop everywhere. Was able to get some good shirts there. It's certainly worth visiting just for the shopping experience to go to. But one thing I'm going to caution you on is the tourists. They're everywhere. Fifth most visited city in Europe. And it shows because they said there was 8.5 million visitors last year, close to 9 million on a city that has like 1.5 million people. Really, I mean, more visitors than people that live there during a year, maybe 4 or 5 times more. So the tourists are everywhere, and it's very crowded. We went, I thought there wasn't going to be hardly anybody there. The place was packed. Part of it, the hotels are very inexpensive. The food is very inexpensive. Getting around is like free. And then there's lots to see and do. So you're going to see quite a bit. The town square is absolutely amazing. Other than having a lot of tourists, the architecture is stunning everywhere that you go. And the viewpoints along the River Vlata. You fly into Havel Airport and you go to the Vlata River, and it's pretty nice. And you can cross the river to go to the castle, cross the Charles Bridge, of course, but there's other bridges that you can cross as well. So this place has certainly some very attractive points to it. Like I said, the thing that was stunning to me was the Kafta head, because it was right outside of the Michelangelo Hotel, which also is known for its beer spa. Notice they have something for everything. I didn't do the beer spa, but they actually had a beer spa inside the hotel. It's one of the few hotels I know that has a beer spa. And the Kafta head outside. So the minute you go outside, you're all of a sudden entrenched into the what I call Prague experience. So it's just it's a pretty impressive city if you have a chance to go. If not, you got to put it on the list. It certainly should be on the list, I would say. And we have it on the list of shows that we're going to show on the Pod TV network. And hopefully we'll be able to do another show on Prague, because it's certainly worth taking a look at again from a different perspective. So if you have a chance, go. If not, well, put it on your list. In the meantime, we'll see you next time on the Pod TV Network Travel Channel, Prague, the city of 100 spires and more.